And hello, everyone. It is so nice to see you. I know many of you, but for those whom I don't know, my name is Ann Corso. I'm the Executive Director and CEO here at the Michener Art Museum. So thank you for coming out on a very cold afternoon. And we have a real treat for you. So today we are celebrating part of the Michener's legacy of Pennsylvania Impressionism and our great Bucks County tradition. And so it is my great pleasure today to introduce Dana Garber. Everybody knows who Dana is, but wave just in case. Dana is the granddaughter of the artist and teacher Daniel Garber, and Dana is an accomplished artist in her own right. She was a trustee of the Michener, and in 2018, for the museum's 30th anniversary, Dana and her sister, Tanis Garbershaw, received the James A. Michener Legacy Award in recognition of Garber's contributions to the canon of American art and the artistic culture of Bucks County. So you're in for a real treat today as she will share photographs and stories about her grandfather and Aunt Tanis. Today, Dana will be in conversation with our own Jerry and Marguerite Lenfest Chief Curator, Laura Igoe. You all know her. So thank you, and join me in welcoming both Laura and Dana for this wonderful conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you, Dana, for joining us today. I'm very excited about this program. Dana has wonderful stories to share. We don't know exactly what we'll be talking about or where this conversation will go, so it's going to be a journey we'll all be on together. I'm going to start today just by introducing Tanis, which hopefully you saw her as you walked through our galleries today. Not only is Tanis on view in painted form in our Putman Smith Gallery, but we also brought out a cherished work in our collection that's not typically on view, but this is Little Girl Knitting, a really fabulous drawing of Tanis by Daniel Garber. So I invite you after the talk to come up and look closely at this amazing, really a gem of a drawing. But the primary focus of our conversation today will be about Garber's painting, Tanis. And I'll advance to the next slide so you can see her in full form. But this is one of several monumental family portraits that Garber would complete in the 19-teens. That, they're portraits of family members, but they're also really careful and sustained studies of the appearance and passage of light. And I think Tanis is a really wonderful example of that. It's a really dazzling painting, as I'm sure you all can see, featuring these really vibrant greens and blues that the artist was embracing in his work at this time, even though his gallerist, Robert Vos, really disliked this palette and wanted Garber to paint in a much more muted way. But critics at the time really admired the work. They acknowledged the technical skill that was evident in this painting, and even compared it to X-ray technology, which was a new technology at the time. And I think you can see this in the way that the light shines through Tanis's clothes. And when I was doing a little bit of research too in the painting, about the painting, I had learned that it was exhibited at the National Academy of Design in 1915, and there it was awarded the second Altman Prize for figure or genre. So Garber won $500 as part of this award. And here it is, Tanis is illustrated here in the New York Times. She's right here. Along with the first prize winner, Charles Hawthorne, Charles Hawthorne's The Offering, and a portrait by Cecilia Beau that also won a prize at the National Academy of Design. But I also thought it was interesting. It's surrounded by these photographs of of military displays, and there's an image of the Red Cross because this was also during World War I. So I just thought the contrast was very interesting of this really sweet portrait of a young girl surrounded by these military images. And Dan and I have talked a little bit too about how this was a time when the United States really wanted something comforting to see in their art because it was a time of war. So why is Tanis here? Why at the Michener? Why are we celebrating this? This painting, Tanis, is not in our collection. It is in the Philadelphia Museum of Art's collection, and it was given to the Philadelphia Museum of Art by Marguerite and Jerry Lenfest, who are longtime benefactors of this museum as well. Many of our Pennsylvania Impressionist paintings came from their collection. My title of Chief Curator is named for them, and thanks for their support. And when they gave Tanis to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, one of the stipulations of the gift is that it comes to the Michener Art Museum every 3 years for 3 months. So we brought Tanis back for her 3-month visit, and when she returns to the Philadelphia Museum of Art, she will go on display in their newly reinstalled American Art galleries. So you'll see her there as well. So I'm going to turn this over to Dana for a little bit to talk about Tanis, and I guess maybe we could start with talking about Tanis as a person. I mean, we see her kind of preserved as a young girl here, but of course she was a person who lived a life, and maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
She's a real person, yeah. I fondly remember her. She was a grand lady, and I won't go on and on about all of my experience with her, but this drawing of her, she was born in Paris. My grandfather married my grandmother. They were students at the Pennsylvania Academy together, and Mary Franklin, my grandmother, was a student of illustration, and she was with N.C. Wyeth, was a classmate. And they studied under Howard Pyle and others. Anyway, that's how they met. They married. Gramps won a Crescent Award, which I'm not sure if there was a second award, because my understanding is that he won 3 years travel in Europe to paint. And the baby was born in Paris, and of course we didn't have FaceTime or anything like that, so grandmother was very lonely, I think, and they had to cut their time in Europe short, so they came back here and landed in New York, and I think he did a few advertising jobs for cash, and then moved to the Philadelphia area when he was employed by the Academy. Anyway, she was the firstborn child. My father was her younger brother by 4 years. Tanis was a picture-perfect child. I mean, she's absolutely lovely. We all think that of our relatives, but she, in particular, was just a painter's dream.
I've got this family photo up too, which
shows there she is on the right.
Tanis, and I think you can see she's almost like doll-like in that photograph too.
And so there are infant drawings of her, and this was the very first major study. And if anyone here has ever studied art or tried to do any kind of art with charcoal, my advice is don't. It's an awfully demanding and unforgiving medium. If you took a briquette from your charcoal grill and tried to do that with it, well, you can imagine you'd have black all over everything, and anytime you touch the paper, it would come away on your fingers. So when you look at this painting, I hope you do get a chance to look up close. Look at the effect of her eyelashes are picked out with an eraser. And the techniques are so exquisite that when I've looked at it in the past, I've thought it was in color. It's just so live. Anyway, she had 3 children, my cousins, and they're all gone now. Well, that's another story. This is bad. When she was, I think, maybe, I'm not sure, I think she may have been 8 when this was painted. And incidentally, and I think we're going to see a companion painting that was done the same summer. And they're so completely different. And I just hope that you can appreciate the range that he can command. At any rate, this was done in one summer, which I think all of the figure studies were done in one season. Many of the landscapes were done over time. Those large landscapes in particular would go out on scene, and his tiny little brushstrokes were meticulously done, and they were done on scene. There may have been some work done in the studio, but anyway, landscapes sometimes took 4 or 5 years, which is one reason why Garber wasn't well known during his later years or his years after he was gone. His body of work was about 750 paintings, which if you consider a lifetime's work for an artist, that's not very much. Redfield, it's been said that he burned somewhere between 500, other stories, to 1,000 paintings before he died. And Gramps did too. He burned several. But back to Tanis, here I go. When he painted it, and this is a hard thing for me to understand, he sold it. I can't imagine letting go of that if I could do that. But he sold it, and off it went to a family, and a couple of generations had it. And then I guess the kids didn't want it or thought they needed to get money for something. Anyway, it went up for auction in Reading, Pennsylvania. And I can remember my kids were really little, so this would have been like 1969.
I think it was
Was it
1970, I think, at least the catalog
69 or
raisonné.
70.
Yeah,
I'm going by
70.
my youngest child, you
Yeah.
know, how old he might have been. It was maybe 2. All right. So my father, who's an engineer and has absolutely no aesthetic ability whatsoever, got a bunch of plywood, heavy plywood, made this box, and he bought foam rubber from a company that made foam rubber and blankets, and he strapped this huge card. The painting's quite large, but this box was even larger because of all the soft stuff he had in there. And we put it onto my station wagon and drove to Reading, and it was an estate auction, someone's belongings. I remember my Aunt Tanis and my father went with me, and I drove. We were going to buy that painting and bring it home. And this was when money was different than it is today. So my dad had $1,000, and my Aunt Tanis had $1,000, and my father-in-law had $1,000. And the three of us, with the package of money, we were going to go bring that painting home. So we sat there, and you know how auctions are. There was a box of plugs and wiring, and then there were some dishes, and on and on and on. Meanwhile, this painting sat against the podium, where the auctioneer's podium. And all morning, all we saw were dishes and laundry equipment and so forth. Then there was a break for lunch, and when we came back from lunch, there was this hush. And we were just on the edge of our seats, knowing, I'm going to get that home. I can be home in time to pick up the kids from school. And the money went, it went $1,000, $2,000, $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. And we didn't know whether to be sad that we didn't get the painting or to rejoice that it had sold for so much money. And anyway, the box didn't go for naught. I have transported paintings in it since, but if you could have seen this going into a plywood box with old foam rubber and blankets, I think the preparators here were absolutely done. Anyway, she stood in the doorway of the studio at the Cuttalossa for that painting, and at the same time, in the evenings, he would paint another large painting called The Boys. Do we have that?
I do. I have to just flip through a little bit, and we can go back and look at some of these too.
There we go.
Yeah.
These were done at the same time, and one's very stark and dark, and the other one's very, well, I don't think I need to explain it. It is what it is.
Very different palettes.
These were three, they were, at the Cuttalossa, which is where he lived, the property had a house, a main house, and then it had the studio building, and then there was a cottage, which he would allow students to come and stay in this cottage and paint during the summer, students that he really was fond of. And they would do some yard work in order to pay for the rental. And these were three of the students that were there that summer, staying in the cottage. And I know the names, but I can't come up with them right now.
I don't have them.
I have them somewhere. Sorry. So that's how the painting got into the stream of finance. It was bought by the Arnold family, who are Arnold Bakery, and it was moved to Florida. What happened to it in between, I'm sure there are people that know, I don't. And then it ended up in the hands of a corporation, Gulf States Paper Corporation, and it was held there for a very long time. In fact, for the exhibition in 2007, the the
Academy.
Pennsylvania Academy had the first part of his life, and this museum, Michener, had the second part of his life. And Tanis was in the PAFA exhibition, but the owner of Gulf States Paper said that it could only be there for a short period of time. I think it was 3 months. And then it had to go back. He wasn't going to part with it for very long. At the point when he retired and Gulf States Paper was being taken over by another company, it was registered with the corporation, so he had to unload it. And then on his white horse comes Jerry Lenfest, and he bought it. Jerry just had an instinct as to when something was coming up for sale, and he swept it up, and he was very fond of the Michener and participated in many, many things here during the time I was connected to the museum. And I thought it was wonderful that he gave it to PAFA, to PMA, Philadelphia Museum of Art. It would be quite an attraction there, but that he wanted it also to be at the Michener. So that deal, I don't think it was here during COVID.
We did take a little break.
Yeah, there was
I think
a break.
the last time it was here was pre-COVID, but yeah.
So I think you should have it for 6 months.
Dan and I tried that, and they didn't let it fly, but that's fine.
Okay.
They're trying to accommodate their exhibition
I know a
schedule
guy.
too. I know. But
Anyway,
yeah.
so that's the story. It still puzzles me as to how Gramps could have sold this painting. But that's why he painted it, was so that others could see and enjoy and appreciate what he could do. So
you mentioned earlier, Dana, you said another painting in the studio. Were you talking about Orchard Window as the other
yes,
one?
she's wearing the same outfit. There are several, in fact.
And I'm sorry, I don't have them side by side.
She also wore that same outfit in the picture on the bench.
Right.
The little bench. That's my aunt. That's her. That's
Tanis.
Tanis.
That's Tanis older.
And the little one is my daughter's daughter, Tanis, the baby. And that's the painting of her. And that's the bench that she's sitting on.
All the Tanises.
The three. Yeah. And the bench and the painting eventually were left to the Corcoran Museum in Washington with the caveat that they have to be shown together. They have to be exhibited together. And the Corcoran collapsed. It folded. It was no longer a viable museum, and so it was taken over by the Smithsonian National Gallery of Art. And a side story, this isn't about Tanis or that painting, but about 5 years ago, there was an exhibition at the National Gallery of Vermeer and his associates of the period when he was painting. It was, there were a few Vermeers, but it was mostly that genre of interior painting with a figure. And I went and saw rooms of beautiful Dutch paintings, just massive. And when you tour through the path you're supposed to go, came out through an archway. This has nothing to do with Tanis. And
That's okay.
there was a hallway and another archway into another gallery, and dead center ahead of me, having just left Vermeer, is Garber's painting of Tanis and my grandmother, called Southern Green Street, which is a beautiful painting too. And she's in it with the golden hair and everything.
That's when they're at Philadelphia home in the interior of that.
Yes,
Yeah.
Green Street, which is now, I think, a parking lot for a Wawa.
No.
What do you do? What are you going to do? Anyway, that's, I'm trying to stick to Tanis.
It's
and
okay. You
hard.
can go.
This is amazing.
We want to hear all the stories, and you know, you were talking about the bench too, and this bench might be familiar to many of you because it's also the bench.
And there's the bench
in Studio Wall, and these paintings were painted the same year, and I think very similar palette. And Tanis, which is 1 year later, right, is just it's so different. I think it's hard for me to talk. Not this Tanis, but the other, the blue and green Tanis. And Dana, can you talk about the bench a little bit too? Because
Sure.
there's like such fun
that
stories about that bench.
My Gramps would do things when my grandmother's father bought the property of the Cuttalossa for them, but it wasn't habitable. So they lived in Philadelphia on Green Street, and he taught at the academy. And meanwhile, the house was getting water and plumbing and electricity put in it. And, took quite a while. So Gramps had to furnish it. He just couldn't go. They didn't have Raymore and Flanagan, you know, so he would go to farms and make deals with people who had old furniture, some of it up in the loft of a barn. And he'd pay 50 cents for a chair and a couple of dollars for I hate to even tell you, for a 1735 Chippendale corner cupboard with the original glass, $3. He had, he bought a set of Hitchcock chairs for 50 cents a piece. I mean, so anyway, he bought this bench, and I think he paid $6 for it. And she was so mad at him
Yeah, his
because,
wife. Yeah, Mary.
Mary,
Right here.
his wife, Mary, was furious that he spent so much money on this little bitty bench. And so when he did Studio Wall, he had her looking at it the whole time. She had to stand there. And the pot is hung from the ceiling by a wire, so she could put her arms down and then reach up and put her arms down. And the kimono, he really dolled that up. The kimono didn't look anything like that. It was, and there were photos of me, which Laura said, well, maybe we should put those pictures. I said, no, you're not going to do that, because I was 10. I was really a drippy-looking kid. Looked like I had taken my own hair and cut it in chunks. And I'm way too small for this kimono. And the sleeves had threads hanging from it. It was torn in places. It was just not as you see it there. But she was painted in that kimono many, many times. That's the mother of Tanis. Mm-hmm. In later years, they didn't get along really well. Grandmother had some issues, I think, and I really can't be more specific than that. But there was, I think, also a jealousy. Tanis became a favorite model, and Mary didn't. She may have felt some kind of antipathy toward Tanis, but Tanis just was a happy, loving. She and my dad were as close as any two people I've ever known. They just were. There was a time. This is a little story which I'm going to tell it anyway. They're all gone, so it doesn't matter. My Aunt Tanis, when she was little, went to school, and she found a purse on the playground. She was little, maybe 8 or 9, maybe this age. And she brought it home, and she was playing with it, and grandmother said, where did you get that? And she said, I found it on this ground. Well, she took it away from her. You stole it. And that Christmas, she didn't get anything for Christmas.
Oh.
So Johnny gave her his toys.
This is your father.
My father gave her his toys. And years later, I don't know, I'm telling this, Gramps told one of my cousins that it just broke his heart, and he never said anything. So always tell people, when you appreciate them. And anyway, it's a very sad story, but that was the stressor dynamic in that family. Gramps was a hugely happy man. I mean, who wouldn't? If you could do this, what problems would you have? I would kill to be able to do this, but he was born with this gift, and it was the 12th child of a dairy farmer in Indiana, and they were, if you've ever heard of them, Dunkard. They're kind of like Mennonite or Amish, or it's a kind of a Puritan sect, I guess. I don't know anything more about it than that, but they were plain folks. So the question is, if you're born into a family of bare walls and simple dress, how do you do that? And but it showed up when he was very, very, very young. And his father, he was the youngest of the 12. And so he was the pet of the family, I guess. And in those days, you had large families so that the kids could work the land and care for the animals and so forth. Well, his father somehow knew that this kid was different. And we're talking in the 1880s. Long story short, he ended going off to art school in Cincinnati. I forgot about that. And from there, he was sent on by the Cincinnati school to the Pennsylvania Academy. And he was very, very young when he went there, but it was a leap of faith for his family to let him go. So anyway, that's a side trail.
Yeah. But I mean, you mentioned too that like he ended up, maybe he preferred Tanis as a model maybe later on, but at this point, he really seemed to be painting both Mary and Tanis in these portraits, and so many of them I think are really about like the light and the feel of his studio, I guess, and like looking out into the garden and everything from the studio. Here's some images of Garber at Cuttalossa and the studio
See the
space.
corner cupboard there?
Yeah, there you go.
That's it.
So that was what, $3 you said?
$3.
I know. I mean, it's amazing to me to think that Tanis, the painting, was
kept
$5,000 in the 70s.
He kept lacquer cans and cans of turpentine in that, and it had rings of stuck gluey, and there was a little tiny wasp nest or bee's nest, some kind of critter, in the corner of it. But he was about the aesthetic. He really was. He would not have hammered together some plywood like my father did for the travel of the painting. He had beautiful, and he had such an aesthetic taste that everything at the time was considered old crap. So this farmer didn't want this old thing. It was probably in the top of the barn, and he hoisted it down, and Gramps used it for paint cans. But the point is that, his paint cans were kept in a Chippendale cabinet. And that's the studio. There he is in the studio.
And there's a hint in the painting too of a French door, but I've read that he did not paint her in the French doors, right? I guess it's a different. It was a
There's
different
a door
viewpoint.
on the side of the room.
Yeah, he added the French doors because thought it looked better than the whatever door was there.
Well, the room was completely closed off. On the exterior photograph of the building of the studio, there are windows, but inside they were walled over. It was plastered over, and except for
you can't see it
here. No,
that's him sitting outside. But those are the windows that appear
and the
in
door
studio
she was
wall.
painted. See the grape arbor there crossing up there. She was painted. Look in a door looking out.
Looking out to the
and you
right
can see
here. Yeah.
On the
which I guess she's looking up this hill, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, she was looking in the studio,
arbor.
but the hill was behind her, and the grape leaves frame that image.
Mm-hmm.
Since I've been an adult, this painting has showed up on covers, and I have many of them, of magazines, art magazines, and has been featured in Architectural Digest. In fact, one of his paintings in the White House when the White House was on Architectural Digest. There's a Garber painting on the cover. There was also another, the American Embassy in Paris had a painting called Mother and Son, which was my grandmother and my dad standing in the doorway of these windows, just as Grandma stood in the doorway where the light on the wall of studio wall is from this doorway. Mm-hmm. And, but I really want to talk a little bit about, because I was showing you earlier the painting of the boys, which was very dark, and then he was what's called a low-key painter. His paintings were, he used very deep, dark palette, did not like white at all, nor did he paint with any black. Black was never on his palette. White was used with hesitation, except for this, the white in it. People might say, well, that's a high-key painting. I remember we talked about that. Mm-hmm. One of the attractions, I think, and I'm talking about him not as grandfather I did spend a fair bit of time at the academy myself, and I actually was the only one of the grandchildren that spent time in the summer with him and took art lessons from him. And I learned so much just about his methods and techniques. And the white that he's used in this, that's not a high key painting. At first, when I was talking with Laura about it, I said, it could be. But I had to see it today in reality to say, no, it's not. The white, which is the dramatic point, has its effect because the rest of it is painted in a very low key. So it has a large impact with the white of her costume and the glow on the top of her hair. It's borderline, I would say. There is, it's one of the more high-key things he's done, but if you really look at his paintings, I can remember at one time there was an exhibition with lots and lots of painters, and many of them were painted in a high key, in other words, using white and using very light colors. And there was a Garber and had a tree trunk that was very dark and gnarly. And when you walked in and looked at the wall, that's the painting you saw. You didn't see the high key ones don't have that impact drama that he could, which low key painters can do, because they have the ability then to accent. And I'm babbling here, but.
We talked about this springtime in the village, and I forget, do you think this is a high key one?
Well,
it's a
certainly
palette
it's using a lot of white,
Tanis,
but it's the contrast.
Yeah.
The contrast tells me that it's a low key, and the emphasis is on, there are a handful of these bright, sunny paintings, but it's your contrast.
Yeah.
He could do
You get
be
some
very
dark
and then juxtapose it against very, very bright. And that's atypical. That's not traditionally his thing. And I also should say that there's been such a fuss made over this Tanis painting, and it's probably his finest piece. It's certainly his most popular piece. But he would get upset if you tried to call him anything other than a landscape painter. That was his forte, as he thought. But time and other opinions have denied him that. I think that truly his figures in a landscape, which is what this really is, it's a figure in a landscape, are his real métier, I guess. Was that a word? It's appropriate. Anyway, what else do we have to talk about Tanis?
Well, we can also take some questions from the audience if anyone has any questions. Jen. Jen. She jumped up. Jen's going to come around with a microphone, too, for questions.
If I may sneak in two questions, if I can sneak in two questions. One, the name Tanis is so unique. Is there a story there? And the second one, I know kids ran around barefoot a lot in old days, but this is his granddaughter. Did she not have shoes? And I love the barefoot, but I'm just curious, is there a story to that?
I'm afraid my hearing aids are
He asked about, which we just talked about recently, but where does the name Tanis come from?
Tanis.
That's part one.
When she was born in France, in Paris, they had a nursemaid for the baby. And the nursemaid, as I remember it, was Indonesian, was not a Parisian, was not an English-speaking person. And somehow, and this is through the grapevine, the word in her language for daughter sounded like Tanis. And they just liked it. So that's the first Tanis I ever heard of. And I have a sister, my sister. My sister and I are the only remaining of the original family. And she's Tanis. And then I have a granddaughter, Tanis. And so I got the name Dana.
And it's
For Daniel.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's after Daniel, right? And then the second question was, so Tanis is barefoot in this painting. Did she have shoes? Or was she frequently, I guess, running around barefoot? Or did perhaps your grandfather just want to capture her in this informal way? She's wearing shoes here.
Yeah,
in the orchard window.
Of course she had shoes. Of course she had shoes. Yes, she had shoes, and they look like Mary Jane's.
Yeah.
But we all went barefoot there. It's if you go out Mechanicsville Road, then there's a road to the left that goes down to the river, and the Cuttalossa is kind of parked in this little glen, we were all barefoot all the time, and that grape arbor that went on the path between the studio and the house, the grapes, when they were ripe, would fall, and bees just swarmed.
Ooh, yeah.
And we were, if they'd put some kind of a pan on the walkway, we could have made our own wine, just walking around on smashed grapes. But the bees really got us. But we were barefoot all the time there. And so I think it also brings her into a nature thing rather than to be shod and dressed. I think he wanted her to appear as kind of just a sparkling thing of nature that didn't have to, dress according to a custom. Mm-hmm. So that's my story, and I'm sticking with it. Yeah. Any questions?
We've got one over here.
What is the relationship between Tanis and another young girl subject of Garber's, Fanny?
Fanny. She asked about Fanny Francis.
Oh, what's the relationship between Tana? That's her daughter. Fanny, the painting out here, was my cousin Francis. There's a story.
Oh.
No, it's very sad, although I have told it several times over the years. The Pennsylvania Academy, when they were going to do that double exhibition in 2007, they were going to have it not in the old Furness beautiful architecture building, but they had bought the old, it was the Veterans Building. It was a big, more modern skyscraper kind of a building next door across the alley of Cherry Street. And that was quite a while ago. And they rehabbed it and turned it into student studios and so forth. So they're going to renovate that downstairs for the Garber exhibition, which was the Lance Humphreys, who was the curator of that, and told me that they spent, to me, $12,000 painting the galleries a certain shade of peach that can be found in all of his paintings. That's another story. Well, so it was ready to hang. The show was going to open on a Wednesday evening at 5, and on the Sunday before, my cousin Frances was going to church, and she was in an auto accident and was killed. Our family had really been looking forward to this exhibition for a really, really long time. After all, Garber didn't have the voice that he had painted not as many paintings so that you could just go anywhere and see them. So to have them collected in this manner would have been a massive, big deal for us, for him. And she was also definitely looking forward to this opening, and she died. The next day, Monday, I think it was, no, it was Tuesday, it was Monday, I got a call from the, no, it was Tuesday. Got a call from the people at the Pennsylvania Academy saying that they might have to cancel the exhibition because a pipe had burst in the wall of the main gallery, and 3 of the paintings had gotten wet. And it was just getting worse, and they didn't know, didn't think they could continue with the exhibition. And I was, I just couldn't even absorb it all. And then I got a call around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and they said, it's worse than we thought, and we have to tear out the wall. And about 5 o'clock, I got a call, and they said, we're going to take down the exhibition in the Furness building and transfer the Garber to the Furness building. This is Tuesday. The show would open on Wednesday. They had been preparing and, painting walls and, getting all the paintings had to be a certain way according to the curator with didactics, in the right position. They'd take down the Furness building, main gallery, crate everything up, store it, get all the paintings off the wall in the Veterans Building, school building, crate those up just to walk them across the street. They called in, this is at 5 o'clock, they told me, we're gonna do it, we're gonna do it. And they called in preparators and anybody they could that worked for any museum in Philadelphia, all pitched in. Crated up, took down the other show, moved the Garber show across the street. The last didactic went on the wall at 4:30 in the afternoon. People worked all night. They took a break around, I was told, around 2:30 in the morning because they were getting slap happy, and continued until the last piece went on the wall at 4:30, and the doors were open at 5 o'clock. So I say, my grandfather was pretty particular about his art and how it was displayed and so on and so forth. He was kind of fussy in that way. So my story is that Frances died on Sunday, and she got to heaven, and she saw my granddad and said, hey, guess what? They're having a giant exhibition in the old Veterans Building of your paintings. And he said, over my dead body. And it all went to where he would have wanted it in the first place. So I can't think of any other. That building had been there and been renovated for years. Why did that pipe burst? And this has nothing to do with the Tanis painting. I apologize. This was his favorite grandchild. She was absolutely gorgeous and happy and kind and just a natural beauty. And that loss took a lot of time to get over.
Yeah.
So, any other questions?
Right here. So you mentioned 750 or so works. I'm mostly familiar with everything that is landscape in the area. Did he also paint outside the U.S. and particularly in Paris?
Did he paint outside the U.S. in Paris?
Oh.
So like for the Crescent
Yes.
Fellowship, he did.
Yes. Well, going overseas he painted very academically when he was a student. Just a child eating soup from a bowl, kind of just the typical kind of interior, ordinary. And then something happened. He went to Europe. He was in France and Italy and England. I think just those 3 mainly.
I think he went to, did he go to Spain? Did he go to Spain?
I don't have any memory of any
Okay.
Spanish paintings, but probably went, I mean, could have, but no, I can't remember any. And all of a sudden, it was landscapes and the palette just went crazy. I mean, it was his palette, and I think they're here at the Michener. His palettes were huge. And he would put tiny drabs of color all the way around. I mean, 4 or 5 greens, 3 or 4 blues, browns, sienna, umbers, on and on. 2 or 3 different reds, and an enormous palette. And the thing about him was, when you paint, anybody here who has used oil paint, you know, you take a little this, a little that, and you mix it in the middle, and then you paint with it. And then when I was there and finally allowed to paint, because I had to draw in charcoal for weeks, awful. And then I was allowed to have paint. And at noon, when we would go in for lunch, I had to clean that palette and mound up everything back the way it was. Anything I had blended for foreground or sky had to be pulled aside and clean the palette with turpentine. Later, you go to the academy, and I wish you could see the kids' palettes had never been cleaned. They were like little volcanoes of dried paint, all the way, like chimneys all over their thing. He was very neat, clean, precise. And I think you can tell that from this. He doesn't paint like anybody else I've seen. You could say, well, maybe he was a pointillist, like Seurat, but no, he's not. I don't know what to call his technique. It certainly isn't impressionism. Impression is an impression. This is a meticulously organized, and one of his tenets when I started to paint was, before you put your brush in the paint or on the canvas, see the whole painting. Now, I never could do that. I don't know many people that could, but that he knew before he started what he was going to accomplish. There was no wiggle room. So I don't know what to call him, but he detested the title of impressionist. And that's what we call him. Ha ha ha.
I do. For those of you really interested in Garber's work and want to know more, and if you're interested too of his work, his paintings made abroad, I would recommend the catalog Raisonné, which we have copies of for sale in the shop. But it's a really valuable resource for Garber, and you can see pretty much images of every all 750 paintings, and all the etchings and drawings, and they're all included in that 2-volume. It's called the Catalog Raisonné, and you'll see it in the gift shop. It's like a 2-volume set in a box. And I think we probably have a deal on it or something in the shop. We'll see. There is a question I want to ask you too, Dana, that I neglected to ask because I asked you to bring something with you today. But I wondered, was Tanis an artist?
Very definitely. Never showed anything. She was more talent in her little finger than my sister and I put together. Both of us went to the academy. She was very, very talented, but as tradition in my family is, Gramps was on the pedestal, and so we didn't challenge that. And so my pictures never went on the refrigerator. And my sister didn't even go to art school until after she was married and away from Pennsylvania. When you asked about, did he paint other than Bucks County, or did he paint in Europe? Yes, and he came here when he went into, lived in the Cuttalossa, and someone from Massachusetts who collected his paintings offered him an opportunity to come up and paint in that area because he said it's so beautiful here. And Gramps went up, and within a few days, he wrote to my grandmother, "I'm coming home. There's nothing to paint here." Bucks County just spoke to him, and so he never went anywhere again, just stuck to what he knew, and that's it. Anyway.
So Tanis wasn't, do you want to show I'm sorry, I'm pressuring you. So, because you said. So
Laura was visiting with me the other day, and I told her about the cookbook. Did we talk about the cookbook?
We haven't talked about the cookbook
we
here.
haven't talked about the cookbook.
A mystery for everyone.
And on my chest in my dining room, I have this stone that my Aunt Tanis painted. And I showed it to her, and she said, "Oh, just bring that." And it's all I have to show of her artistic ability. But I'd love for you to have a look at it. It's very, very...
Jen, do you think, could you maybe walk around a little bit with it? I'm sorry to put you on the spot. Thank you. But I love, because we talked a little bit, and you mentioned how, your grandfather was such a, this big academic painter and teacher and was so well regarded but it seems that many people in your family, including yourself, including Tanis, pursued the arts and were artistic and creative, as you said, but just found different media or ways to engage with that. Do you think that's accurate?
I think, at least in this family, my sister suppressed her interest in art because, and this is a quote from her, she said, "I saw what happened to you." But you're born with a drive for that. It's in you somehow. I do remember being very, very little, and I wanted to copy something that I saw in a newspaper, and I was maybe 4 and just didn't have the agility. And so I had another cousin from my mother's family do it, and I remember being very, very upset with him because he didn't do it the way I wanted him to do it. It's almost an emotional drive. You can't, it's just there. But when you are little and learning to express yourself, there's criticism. You don't get praise, you get criticism. And so it shuts you down. And I'm not sorry. I have wonderful kids and I have had a great life, but I also didn't have the drive. I think every successful artist, bar none, is born obviously with great talent. The second thing they have that's missing in a lot of us is confidence in your ability, belief in yourself. And the third factor is business. Garber knew, and he painted these large paintings, and they would go on tour. And he'd put them in crates, and they would go from Minnesota to California to New York, and then sometimes 3 years before they came back to him. And that was his way of getting known. We didn't have the print media we have today. They certainly didn't have any media as we have today. And so that was how they got familiar with him. The other thing was that he had many, many collectors who would go to the Cuttalossa. He sold pretty much himself. He didn't trust dealers very much. And so he would sell to the same family. And so they would have maybe 10 or 12 of his paintings. That didn't get them spread out the way they might have made him well known if he had been with the dealer, but he just didn't trust them. So, and that's not to say there were several that he was very, very happy with, but in general, so business is another factor and it's a trifecta. I just didn't get the other two. I don't know that I got so much of the first one either, but the passion is definitely inborn, and I have that to show for it. That's it.
I think we're going to take one more question.
Yeah, I wondered, since they met in art school, if Mary ever continued with her painting.
Did Mary, your grandmother, also continue with her artistic studies in painting?
My grandmother, no, she shut down pretty much. She again, I think it was not competition, but she was in a different style. She was an illustrator, and her life work, which is really very sad, was illustrating the life of Joan of Arc. It was a big manuscript, and the text would be in the middle, and then there would be like old manuscript paintings and Bibles, with the illustration around it. And it was, she spoke French, so she would translate from the French. I think that's what, I don't think she wrote it in French. Anyway, she spent her life on this beautiful thing. After Gramps died, suddenly, I mean, literally, almost overnight, she became demented. And with everything going on, nobody took this away from her, and she ruined it. She was going to give it to my cousin Robin, and she ruined it. Oh. They just let her still, because it kept her happy. And it's tragic, it really is, because she worked on that all my life, I can remember.
So was it
doing that.
Was it a manuscript? A manuscript or paintings?
It was on paper,
Okay.
It was hand lettered.
Wow.
And then painted, much like in the cookbook.
The cookbook. We're referencing a cookbook, which, where did your copy go? Sorry, just, do you want to mention the cookbook? Since we keep bringing it up.
Yeah, while we were talking, has anybody seen this? Oh,
Some
please.
people have.
This was produced from the Trinity Silbury Episcopal Church in the 50s. And it's called, did you show the picture of her?
Yeah, I have that. I can put it back up, but I have it.
This is her just before she died.
There she is.
There she is. Mm-hmm. That is that. Mm-hmm.
All Tanis.
I just loved her. And so this book was produced, and it's full of illustrations by all the local artists, early Bucks County artists, and they made the illustrations for the cookbook, and many of the recipes in here are from either the artists or their wives or people that lived in Bucks County. And my grandmother did one called Making Children, or Preserving Children. And this is very much like her, I don't know, you can't see it, but very much like her Jeanne d'Arc illustrations. It was the drawing around and the text in the middle. I don't know if you can see that. Mm-hmm. But anyway, this has been around for years and years and years, and Laura had never seen it, and so she was quite fascinated with it. And
Tanis did the lettering.
And all of all of the text, other than the artist's signature or the signature of the recipe maker, was Tanis doing the calligraphy for it. But she never did an illustration or a drawing that stone is all that I have left of her art.
But this cookbook has illustrations by Dana Garber, Arthur Meltzer, John Follansbee, Harry Leith Ross, Faye Swengel-Badura. I was just really shocked when I saw it.
It's not even on Amazon anymore.
You have to find it on
out of print.
Yeah, secondhand stores.
Yeah, and eBay.
eBay. All right.
Anyway, it was a gem in its day.
Yeah. No.
So I've really been holding myself back. I have so many stories, but wanted to concentrate on this, and I don't think I did very well, but just go and look at it. It pretty much speaks for itself. It's all there, the tiny brush strokes. Look at the legs, her legs in the painting. And you see horizontal stripes of color, dark, 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 dark color. And then you go from that to the white, the stark white of that shirt and the glamour of that hairdo. It's hard to walk away from it because then you see something else. Anyway.
Thank you all very much for coming today. And
Thank you.
go enjoy Tanis. Thank you, Dana.
Thank you.